So I want to go through, some experiences that I find have been the most inspirational experiences, or some of the really tough experiences I've had that have been the real driving force behind most everything I now do. These are the type of experiences that, when I used to read Robert Monroe's books, and when I started reading William Goldman's book, I'd look at these, these beings, and I'd think, that's really special stuff they're experiencing. And I had those moments where, in that first year of practice for me, where I learned patience and I learned how to meditate in a really deep way, but I wasn't having, those sort of out-of-body experiences. I wasn't having any out-of-body experiences. But reading that stuff, it really inspired me. And it really inspired me to keep going. William Goldman's book I hadn't read by then, but Robert Monroe's stuff I'd read through several times, in the course of having the Gateway sort of stuff I was studying. And his third book in particular really inspires me. Ultimate Journey, I find really fascinating. I think there's sort of a lot of material to be read between the lines with that particular book. So I'm trying in my own sort of way to give back, to be able to serve, as inspiration and perhaps as motivation, to serve up something that could be useful. So this is what this talk is about, if you like. It was probably 6 years ago now when I was doing internet marketing. And this kind of thing, by that time it was 4 years I was having the conscious out-of-body journeys as an adult. I'm 44 years old now, and the conscious stuff started when I was about 30, 35. So I was doing internet marketing, had my own company, and things were going really good, had a good income from it, but it just felt like there was a hole in my life. It felt like there was something I wanted to be able to share with others. The teaching stuff, every time I thought about it, I just thought, I don't have anything to share in that way. I don't have anything, I don't know if I have a voice. And I then sat down in meditation and felt, that I needed to go out of body, actually. So I sort of lay down and I deepened it. There was just like a signal that said, come and play. And I came out of body, and I met with one of my guides at the time. And telepathically, when I asked a question about, this change in direction, this life purpose, etc., suddenly an image appeared in my mind of me standing on a sort of in my local town center of about 100,000 people, and wearing a sign which was like sticky taped to my chest, and it said something about a workshop and on sort of consciousness. And I was like, no way, I'm going to stand on a street corner and look like a ninky nonk wearing a taped on sign. But my guide gave me this really reassuring sort of nod. And so I went back to my body, and I sort of digested that for the next few days. And I sat down in meditation again. I got that strong signal, and again that image. And I thought, when I've been out of body and I've been in contact with my guides, they really they've always really had my back. I always felt they had my back, and I felt on this occasion it should be no different. If they feel that was something I would serve me, I'm going to do it. So I got my printer out, my computer, and I printed off free workshop on consciousness, and I sort of taped it to my chest and taped it to my back when I got into this local town center, and I had my clipboard. And almost immediately when I stood out on the street wearing this, there were a few people walking by sort of giggling, and I thought, this is kind of energy of mocking. And it didn't feel good, but then I suddenly had this feeling that I'm not there for them. It's not their time. I was there for someone else entirely. And I stood out there for an entire weekend, and before the weekend was out, I had 24 brave souls walk up to me and put their name down on my clipboard and their telephone number and their email address. And a week later, I invited them all over to my house to come for an evening talk. And they all showed up. All 24 of them showed up. I was really impressed, really surprised. And I remember preparing my talk notes for that very first talk that I would give. And it took me pretty much the good part of a week. And the night came, and I was just like ruffling through all these notes. It was like, I don't have enough. I'm going to freeze up, and this just isn't going to go right. It's going to be bad. It's going to go really bad. And by the end of the night, when we were finished sharing, people were just really deeply touched. And that's when things got traction in a big way. That's the moment when I really learned to have the courage to trust that inner guidance. And from there, I sort of just pushed on. And within a couple of weeks of that, in fact, I was self-employed with my internet marketing business, and I called up all my clients, just called them all up, and I sort of just told them, look, I'm going to have to let you go. And they're like, what do you mean let us go? We would normally it'd be the other way around. I was like, no, I want to focus on something else. I kept one of them, my biggest client at the time, just as a little bit of a cushion. My wife at the time, she didn't understand it, but I felt I really needed to do it, and I didn't want to have any mixed messages. I wanted to sort of just focus on one thing. This is the thing in my life. I've always found that when I focus on one thing and I give it all my energy and I show up, I make something happen. And so, coupled with that new sort of that new sort of courage I had, for trusting those inner sort of messages, I just went for it. I formed my meetup group back in London. It went up, and within something like a couple days of going up, had something like 70 members. I thought, oh, that's cool. And I ran my very first event. I remember sitting at my computer at night and thinking, okay, what's the first event going to be for this meetup group? And suddenly, flashed in my head, synchronicity. And then synchronicity walk. And I was like, a synchronicity walk, what would that be like? And over the years, that's how all this, most of my events come. Literally, I'll get a name of an event. That might be Jurgen. No, that's not Jurgen. And sorry, what was that? What was that just said? Oh yes, I get like a name an event, and then I build the event around the name, and I really find that works really well. And so came up with the name Synchronicity Walk and devised the sort of concept and put it out there, and had 25 people attend the first walk. And to me, the idea with synchronicity is it really serves as a window, so we can, to see the behind-the-scenes working of reality. I always knew from a very young age, especially in my hitchhiking days, that there was some sort of behind-the-scenes force guiding me. I may not have understood at the time what it was, but I knew it was there. There was evidence of it being there. And so, that served as inspiration. So on the synchronicity walk, the idea was we'll get dice. And so I got some dice, and I thought, okay, when we get to things like street corners, I wanted to take all possibility of control out of this, experience. To really learn to trust our inner guidance and to show people how powerful that can be. And I trusted that on the night, synchronicity would actually appear. It would manifest. And I wouldn't be sitting there at the end of the night, thinking, oh God, that was just all wrong. I really felt it would work if I just put all my energy in and trusted it and sort of put it out there. And I did, and people showed up, and I had the dice, and I said, okay, this is what we do. So when we get to street corners, we'll roll the dice, we'll nominate different sort of streets based on the numbers and all this, and we'll let the dice guide us the whole night, and we'll follow our instincts. And I only created 2 guidelines. I said, first one is you follow your gut instinct. If you get an instinct about something like, oh, we should go down that alleyway, then I said, okay, then we'll trust you. We'll go down that alleyway. And the second instinct was never doubt that instinct. Never second guess yourself. So if you have a sense about something, stick to it, and we'll follow that. And it's teaching people, very valuable lesson within spiritual circles and personal growth to really deeply trust yourself. Let go of the doubt, because at some point with all this phenomena, you have to let go of the doubt. That is the only way you're going to deepen this experience more and more and more. And so we got out there, and magic just started happening. And I'd put the event up again every few months, and it would fill up again, and it became the most popular event. It's still the most popular event, almost 6 years later. I'll put it up, and it'll go to a waiting list within hours after putting it up. And people are always talking about the walks, because you can sometimes get back-to-back, really big synchronicities. Things that open you up like a cosmic can opener and you just can't step back from it. You can have doubt initially, but when the next synchronicity rolls in, like within minutes, you're like, you really start thinking about it. You really start thinking, is there actually a force? You should see the people when they come on these walks. They're stunned sometimes by the magnitude of these synchronicities. One of my absolute favorite that I usually talk about, in my talks and lectures, because it just shows that, how quickly things can unfold if you really deeply trust. So at the beginning of the night, the concept is developed to the point to where we now roll the dice at the very beginning to get a group number. And maybe it'll come up as a 6, and then we'll follow that as like a breadcrumb trail. So if we get to a street corner and there's a number 6 on the building, then we'll first ask ourselves, okay, does this feel like we're forcing it, or is this a breadcrumb trail? Like synchronicity has laid out these breadcrumbs for us to follow. And this is how we'll go about it. That way we don't force things to happen. We don't try to control things. So on this one occasion, we rolled the dice, and our group number was the number 4. And throughout the night, we're using that as part of our guidance. And then we got to a street where we rolled the dice again, and our group number 4 came up again. And we looked up, and immediately there was a bus stop that said number 4 bus stop. In central London, there's only going to be one number 4 bus route. So we decided it might be a good idea to get on the bus. The moment we decided that, number 4 bus came around the corner. So we thought, that's synchronicity itself. So the bus rolled up and stopped. As we were piling on the bus, there was about 18 or 20 of us, we were piling on the bus, it started to rain. We got on the bus, and it was now pouring with rain, but we were dry. So that worked out. That was a good synchronicity. We get on the bus, and we roll the dice again, and we got into number 9, so we decided we'll go 9 stops before we get back off the bus. So we could have rolled a 6, we could have rolled a 5, we could have rolled a 12, but we rolled a 9, and when we got to the 9th stop, as we were getting off the bus, it stopped raining. So it was, again, perfectly timed. We get off the bus, and the bus pulls away, and we're standing there, and I'm standing there with my mouth open. There's a sign somebody plastered onto a brick wall that said, "Wait here for further instructions." It's like, yes, thank you, universe. And everybody around is like, what? So it was just back to back to back synchronicity. And people were really getting excited. They're like, what's next? And so we waited. We waited only a few minutes. And by that time everybody was like, something's going to happen. We will wait here. And we did. And a black cab taxi drove up. And the passenger got out, and we asked the driver, said, look, we've been instructed to wait here. We told him we're not tourists, we don't want to go to Buckingham Palace. Could he just randomly choose a direction for us? And he was like, yeah, back that way. And so he was, okay, fine, thank you very much. And trundled off we went. And suddenly we came to this point where there was this tower block, apartment block. And there was this thumping music coming from, the top floor flat, the top floor apartment. And I said to everybody, I said, why don't we gate crash this party? It's obviously a party. Why don't we gate crash? It just felt right. And the moment I said that, this guy comes out of this pub across the street, like with great purpose. And he looks at us, this big group sort of hanging out in front of the building. And he goes, what are you guys up to? And I said, well, we were just deciding to go up and gate crash this obvious party. And he goes, what a coincidence. My mates just bet me I wouldn't go up and gate crash the party. And he even used the word coincidence. It was just, which synchronicity is meaningful coincidence. So we all sort of burst into this apartment block. We sort of gets upstairs to the top floor. We knock on the guy's door. Opens the door, boom, boom, all this music, and he's got a spliff. And he's like, what's going on? He's looking at all these people, 20 of us, but however, 18, 20 people, plus this other guy now, and Tony was like, hey. And I spoke to him and said, well, this is what we're doing, synchronicity and this and that, and we wound up here. And he was like, that's really amazing, come on in. So we all pile into his apartment, and we had a great time. So, again, it was that sort of stuff that I love. It's just so special to be able to introduce people, take them deeper into other recesses of reality that maybe they've never experienced before. Maybe they've never trusted themselves enough. But on a night like that, it gives them permission It's like a group trust, and it gives them permission to be part of that. Maybe where if they were on their own, they wouldn't trust themselves so much, but in the group, they're like, okay, I'll go with this crazy guy and see what he's up to. And so over the years, it's developed like this, and some synchronicity walks, we get out there, and I can see the synchronicity building. Because synchronicity doesn't always just come along and boom, right there, exposing itself point blank. Sometimes it starts very subtly. And I've got to a point where I can actually see the emergence of it. And I get excited, and then people are like, I can hear them mumbling in the back, he's just reading into stuff. But it's just like, it is something that you get so attuned to. And you just know. And then suddenly, bam, and people are like, whoa, how did he know that? It is just that pure intuition, and you really, again, learning to deeply trust, to have the courage to follow that guidance. Lance, are you here? You might remember, we went on another synchronicity walk. It was the picnic one. You were on that, weren't you? Yeah. So our group number was two fives. Was that right? We rolled in double fives or something like that. So 5 and 5. And we got, sort of out there, and you got to understand that we're rolling the dice, and the dice are literally creating the direction. It's choosing the direction. We're not forcing anything. So we're not sort of thinking, okay, we're going to go this way, and that the dice is deciding. And we got on this one street, and walking along, and we came to an intersection, and it was a one-way sign. I think, Amir, you might have been there as well. And there was a one-way sign, and so I was thinking, okay, well, we'll follow that, because the universe is telling us one way, this is the way. So we went that way, and our group number was 5-5, or 5, whatever it was. It wasn't 5, it was either a 5, like a 2 and a 3, or 5s, but I think it was 5s. Do you remember?
I remember, but I remember the name,
okay.
I remember the number.
So we're walking along, and then suddenly, we're on one side of the street, and there's a park diagonal to us. And I see 2 young lads, maybe about 10 years old, and they're kicking around a football. And I had this strong feeling that we needed to go over to these lads. And there might have been how many with us that day? Again, about 20 maybe?
25.
25 even. So if you can imagine, 25 of us piling over towards these 2 little boys. And I already had in my mind that we needed to talk to them. We get over there, and I asked the boys if they would mind if we joined them for a game, kickabout for some football. And they were like, yeah, of course, join us. And I didn't notice it at first. I don't remember who noticed it.
They had 2 t-shirts.
They had 2 t-shirts, and one of the t-shirts, it said 5th Avenue, as in 5.
Yeah.
And the other one had a one-way sign on it. No, it had it. And it said something else. And he had the number 5 on his jersey.
Yeah.
And we were like, whoa, that's just...
From the meetup.
Yeah, we've got pictures of it. It was just stunning. But see, that's just it. I could have been standing there on the road and got that instinct and thought, no, they're 2 little boys. We shouldn't go over and harass them. There's 25 of us. But I followed that instinct nonetheless, even though part of my special effects crew were probably thinking, shy away, run now. But we did it, and it was magic.
They were the 2 captains of the 2 teams.
Yeah, we made them the 2 captains of the teams. They picked teams, and it was a lot of fun. Because once again, we really deeply trusted that it was going to work out. So a couple years ago, I decided, okay, I'm going to now mix synchronicity with one of my other favorite things. So synchronicity is one of my favorite phenomena. And one of my favorite things to do is hitchhiking. So I thought, I'll combine the 2. So I got out, and I thought I'd do a synchronicity hitchhiking trip. So I made up my signs. So usually, when I used to hitchhike in the States, I'd hitchhike from Florida to Alaska, things like that, as I talked about. And sometimes you'd hold up hitchhiking signs on a bit of cardboard, and you'd write with a pen where you were going. So if I was going from Tampa, Florida to Washington, D.C., because I've got family that lives up that way, then I'd hold up a sign that would say D.C. or something like Virginia. And the idea would be that if somebody was going straight there, then they'd probably be more inclined to pick you up because, you help keep them awake, maybe you share the drive with them, the driving, duties, versus if you don't have a sign, you're just going to get a lot of local traffic and it's going to take a lot longer. So I used to do it that way, but with my synchronicity hitchhiking trip, I thought, you know what? There's been a lot of times I've been in cars with people and we're talking about, men in particular, talking about football all the time, and it's just like, it's not very stimulating for me. I like football, but I don't want to talk about it for like 6 hours in a car. And so I thought, how do I get around this? And make it really creative. So I thought, okay, great, fine. So I made up my first sign that said astral planes. And so I thought, just hold that and see what that happens. And I thought, okay, a lot of people won't know what that means. So I probably would take longer to get a lift, but I thought at least when somebody picks me up, it's going to be an interesting conversation. What is that? Even if they don't know. And so I'm standing there on the street, on the side of the street, and this was just south of London, just outside the M25 in England. And I'm holding up the sign, and this guy almost quickly got a reaction. Pulls over. He pulls down his window, where he opened up his door, actually. He's like, "Where are you going? You trying to get to Gatwick Airport?" And I was like, "Oh, no, wrong kind of planes, dude." And so it felt right to wave him on. And so I said, I'm cool, I'm all right where I'm at. And he said, okay, and he rolled off. And very shortly after, another car pulled over, and it was a young lad. He was probably about 20 years old. And I'm in the car, and a couple minutes into the journey, he makes that fatal, makes that fatal question, I guess you could say. And he asked me what I do for a living, and I was like, I don't know who he is. I didn't tune in enough up to that time. I thought, okay, I'm not going to go right in with the OBE stuff. I'll just maybe talk about lucid dreaming, because we all dream, and we don't have to hang up our belief systems about that. We all dream. So I could start with the dream stuff, and then tell him that, scientifically validated, and lucid dreaming, and da-da-da-da-da. And I was talking to him about it, and you could really see the cogs, the wheels turning in his head as I was watching him drive. And it was just like he was really getting this, and it was a really deep getting. And he was like, so let me get this straight. Let me see if I got this straight. So you're saying to me, he goes, for example, I really like customizing cars. And I'm a mechanic, but in my spare time, I customize cars. So I said, if I get lucid in a dream, would I be able to maybe take a car, like just a blank sort of canvas, and then sort of spray it up and customize it with different ideas? And you're telling me, those ideas could probably be better than I would usually do, while awake, because you're telling me my mind might be more clear and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, pretty much. I said, may not work the first time or the second time, but at some point, if you practice enough, that kind of thing can happen. And he sort of went back, and he was driving, and you just see the wheels just turning faster and faster. And so I explained to him how to trigger, lucid dream experiences and da-da-da-da-da. And then I was actually going to see Jürgen that night. Jürgen and I were going to do some filming together. And so he dropped me off, not too far from where Jürgen lives. But when he pulled over, he sort of immediately turned off the car engine. And I knew he was going further, so I was like, ooh, I think I better sort of just hang out a second. So I didn't say anything. I was just sort of waiting, because I could sense that he had something was in his head. And he eventually said, I've worked where I've been working for a few years, as a mechanic. And he says, I've never, ever asked my boss to go home early. And he said, today, I just felt I needed to go home early. And he said, if I had still been at work, I'd have never caught up with you. I'd have never met you. And I knew he was really getting it in a way that he probably never, ever, ever thought about life. He was just making that connection of synchronicity, and probably never even heard the word synchronicity. And so I sat there, and I was just reassuring him that, this could be the case. And he said, you know what I would normally do? I would go home after work, I'd grab some beer, I'd get my dinner, and I'd play Xbox for the whole night. And he said, I just don't feel like doing that tonight. And I could really feel how this short ride in the car together was deeply affecting his consciousness. And he was like, I've never had a conversation like this with any of my friends. We've never talked about any of this stuff. We wouldn't have even known this kind of thing exists. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled out one of my business cards and I handed it to him. I said, look, if you're ever in London, I run a workshop I call the Tower Workshop. It's a weekend workshop. Come as my guest. You don't have to pay. Just come, enjoy yourself. And if you want to take things deeper, then this is a good environment for it. You'll be safe to explore it. And when I got out of the car and he drove off, I was just stood there. And I felt really touched myself. I felt really touched that I was able to serve. And I knew all that stuff that, even for me, when on that particular occasion, when before I got on the road, I took a train to get out of inner London, and then when I got off out of the train, instead of getting straight onto the motorway or the highway, it started to sort of lash with rain, and I thought, okay, I'll go and have a coffee. And so I went to a little coffee shop, and I sat and I was drinking away, and the rain was just lashing down, and I was thinking, this is all perfect. There's probably reason behind this. So even from my end, I was being slowed down. And I'd experienced that before when I was hitchhiking in the U.S., when I was going from state to state. I just had this sense that sometimes some of the people that were picking me up, that maybe before they set out for their drive, they were delayed. Maybe they should have been on the road earlier, or sometimes it was me that was delayed, but it was a delay because something behind the scenes was making sure we were delayed so we would be perfectly synchronized in our meeting. Because that's just it. To the casual observer, maybe it's just coincidence. To the observer, to the experiencer, there's meaning there. It's a meaningful coincidence. So went to do the filming with Jürgen, stayed overnight with him. Next morning I hit the road after we did the filming. And he went out of his way. He's a very nice chap. He drove me about a good hour. And when I was like, Jürgen, you really could drop me there and I'll be fine. No, we'll drive a bit further. No, there's good too. No. And so I just gave up letting him drive and eventually dropped me off in a spot that he thought was really good, which turned out to be really good. And almost the immediate first guy that picked me up after having the astral plane sign up again, the guy picked me up and immediately gave this guy license to go straight into what he really wanted to talk about. And he was like, I go to sleep at night. And this is literally straight as I get in the car. He's like, I go to sleep at night. And I'm like, this is great. I had this recorder sitting here on my lap recording it because I know magic's going to happen. And the guy's like, I go to sleep, and the moment my head hits the pillow, the moment I fall asleep, I fall straight into a lucid dream. And he said, I stay lucid for 8 hours. And he said, my girlfriend thinks I've got a serious problem and I should go to the doctor. I was like, no! Do not listen to your girlfriend! You are perfectly okay. And he's an engineer. And he was telling me that he's gotten used to all this time on his hands at night in the dream. And he said, I get really creative sometimes. So if there's a project going on at work, which is flummoxing me in any way, then I use the dream to get very creative to solve the problems and the challenges. And I said, that's just classic. It's brilliant. And he said, yeah. And a couple of months ago, I was really stuck out with some tooling stuff. So in the next dream, when I was conscious, I decided to create what I needed there and test it out. I mean, he's got his own research and development department in his theater of his mind every night, and it's free of charge. There's no, sort of funding that's required for it. And he said, yeah, so I created this idea in the dream to solve the challenge we had. And when I woke up, I used some technique I learned to wake myself up so I could write stuff down. And he said within a few days of that experience, he created this new tool, so he tooled it, and used it for the project, and now he sells that tool to other engineers. And he created this from a dream. And he was probably one of these little quirks of the universe that you maybe once in a lifetime get to meet. Sometimes you've seen a documentary, and I was there with this guy. And to him, this was just, this has become his normality. This is normal for him, whereas this is, for us, we're like trying to build up to that. So, that kind of stuff I find really fun. So I've now just, in my mind, when I want to start taking people deeper who have never been deep before, synchronicity is a great starting point. It really, if you trust yourself enough, if you have the courage to trust yourself enough, you will find the magic because it is already there. It's kind of like the stories that I've read about the great European sailing ships that have gone, circumnavigated the globe in those early sort of years of European navigation around the world. And I don't know how true some of the stories are, but there's one about Magellan when he's in the Pacific Islands, and they came across an island, and the indigenous peoples of the island, they couldn't see the tall European sailing vessel sitting out at sea. They couldn't see the big ship. It was when they started rowing up in the rowboats from the ship up to shore that finally, this indigenous peoples could see the boats, the small boats, because in their, reality, they had the concept of, they had their own small canoes. So that was easily digestible for their belief systems. But they couldn't see the ship. And this is called a negative hallucination, or belief system blindness. Their beliefs, their current belief structures are blinding them to other possibilities. Things that are so radically outside of their current belief systems just literally turn into a negative hallucination. It doesn't exist. And so apparently they found the shaman of this group. And as like any shaman, it's his role in the community to be open to experiencing phenomena, to mystical, having mystical experiences. So they were communicating with him by drawing in the sand and communicating with him with sign language to use his imagination. And within a short period of time, he was able to conceive of this bigger idea, and he was able to see the ship. And then he was able to communicate that idea to his community because he was a trusted source within that community. And this is the same with us. When you learn to really deeply trust yourself, you will start to see what currently you don't see, but is still there nonetheless. And that is the magic that's all around us, even within our out-of-body experiences. Some of you might be flagging a little bit. You might be feeling, a little bit low. You're being sleep deprived. Please understand this for what it is. You are sleep deprived. You are, your expectations, your very high expectations that you had before arrival so far maybe not have been met in the ways that you thought they were going to be met. You're feeling a little bit bummed out. Some of you. Others may be really excited, already having a few out-of-body journeys, a couple lucid dreams. So there's a mixture of energy, but I want you to really dig deep into those reserves, because I'll tell you this, if I didn't keep trusting myself, I wouldn't have had any of these experiences. And this isn't even the tip of the proverbial iceberg, what I'm communicating to you right now. Not even the tip. What I share with you on this tiny bit of paper tonight, it's not even hitting the waterline of some of the experiences that I've had over the course of the last 10 years by trusting myself. Even some of the experiences that perhaps at first felt like they were traumatic. Exposing a nerve to a very deep fear. And just because it seemed like an unknown didn't mean that, it was time to sort of hang up the exploration boots, because there was fear. That was just something to practice with. Only something to practice with. Only something to sort of, once again, doubt can sometimes just be that test. That's how I see doubt. It's just testing me, saying, are you really sure you want to go a little bit deeper? To me, that's what doubt is. And so when it comes up, I just know there's a gift. There's probably many gifts. Because once I trust, in that moment, that road will lead to many other pathways to explore. So infinite gifts behind one doubt. Infinite. Okay, so over the last few years, I trust myself with, my astral sort of journeys too. I've taken the hitchhiking concept from here straight to the astral. I remember on one occasion I was out of body and I was just in this very nondescript astral location. And I suddenly thought to myself, I wonder if I could hitchhike on the astral. I thought, I don't know how that works, but we'll see how it goes. And then suddenly I had this sort of individual appear out of nowhere. And then there were these in America we call them Winnebagos. Over here, I guess, motorhome. You've got a Winnebago, haven't you? You know what I mean? And these Winnebagos just start appearing out of nowhere. And it wasn't the fact that it was a hallucination or a projection. It was just that reality knew before I did what was about to happen, what was going to happen on that occasion. Because again, time and space is just an illusion to a degree. And I showed up, what seemed at the right place, right time, had a question, got an answer, and this guy basically says, look, just knock on any of the doors. And they sort of park up and I knock on one of the doors, and this sort of group of individuals invite me in. And I'm asking myself, what's up with all these sort of Winnebagos? Where are they going? And why are there Winnebagos on the astral? And I get this sort of telepathic download that there's a whole heap of guides in one go moving a whole group of individuals up another level. And they're doing it in this sort of scenic route. The scenery doesn't really exist. The Winnebagos are just sort of like a scam almost, just to sort of, as they're sort of raising vibrational frequency, slowly the scenery is changing. It's become even more stunning and scenic, and they're just like, oh, wow. And it's shifting them away from their fears into awe, and they're just being totally duped by their guides out of this lower environment into a higher environment. This is really cool. And so I'm in this one Winnebago, which suddenly becomes like the TARDIS, from Doctor Who. I get inside, and it's expansive. I'm just like, this place is weird. And this whole group of individuals, just like, I've stepped into Barbie and Ken world. Everybody was more, it's like they were competing with each other. If you've ever had a dream experience or an out-of-body experience with a deceased loved one, you may have noticed they sometimes come back to you in their younger form. And you think about it, if they're going to be sort of now on these other levels in their new residences, and once they learn that the idea of age might have been a rule set for that reality that they just left, through the transition of death, and they suddenly realize they can change their looks almost at will. These individuals discovered that, and they were literally almost like competing with each other, and it was so plasticky and fake looking, but it was just like everybody was just really, Barbie and Ken. So it was a strange experience, but I really enjoyed that sort of astral hitchhiking. That was fun. And, so things progress, you have these experiences, and you just always follow that breadcrumb trail. I remember in my first year, things were just always magnetic. I'd get out of my body, and suddenly I'd get like a tug on my energy, or a wormhole would open up, and I'd go with the flow. And in the second year, I suddenly got really cocky. I thought, I'd get a tug, and I'd be, no, I'm not going to follow that today. Or a wormhole would open up and I'd go, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to go away. And suddenly the experiences went from being really deeply profound to me trying to control them too much. And I find, just like here on this level of reality, when we get too much in the way, sometimes we miss stuff, or sometimes we get exactly what we want because we're controlling it, but we miss something that could have been much better. An example of that, the very first time I ever ran an event at the Tower in London, which is this Victorian water tower, red brick, 130 foot tall, 7 stories, and they've converted it from this old water tower to a beautiful venue. A few of you have seen it. And sorry, a little fleeting message. So
water tower.
Yeah. I'm going to move on from that just for a moment. I'll come back to that. So I find that when we really, really trust on all these different levels. So I was being really over-controlling. Okay, no, I'm going to move back to the tower. No, I'm just getting conflicting sort of messages, but I'm going to go back to the tower. So the very first run-in at the tower, running that workshop there, I had this feeling that I needed to sort of photograph everything because it was just such a beautiful environment. I needed to video everything. And I remember it was a week before the event, and I'd still done none of this, but it was on my to-do list. And midweek came, and I still hadn't done it, and I was stressing about it a little bit. And then I suddenly sort of remember letting go a little bit and thinking, you know what? If it's meant to be, it'll be. I still desired it to happen. I was still connected to it, but I thought, I'll let it go for now. And almost within like an hour of letting it go, I received an email from the editor of the largest spiritual magazine in the UK, and she asked if she could have a press place for a photographer and a reporter to come along and report on the event and then do up a 2-page spread. And I was like, camera. Wow, where'd that come from? Camera. Something better, not just a camera, but reporting and 2-page spread. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll have that. Great manifestation. Better than the one I was, really stressing about, because it had to happen in a certain way. And then one day before the event, a cinema photographer got in touch with me and he said, look, I'm doing this documentary on consciousness. I'd like to come and video you sometime, do an interview with you. And I thought, why don't just invite him to the tower? And I said to him, why don't you come? I'm doing a workshop this weekend at the tower. It's a beautiful location and you can film all you want. And it didn't click until I got off the phone and he agreed, said yes. And I was like, boom, video. Got to the tower and ran the first weekend, no assistance. I had something like 20-some people show up, and I had no assistance. I did everything. I did, like cooking, cleaning, the facilitating, building up beds for people. I did everything, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? If I would have gone out and hired a camera and a video recorder, they would have stayed in their bags the whole weekend. Yeah. And that, again, I was stressing because it needed to be in a certain way. I wasn't trusting that there was another part of me that had a bigger picture perspective of my life. And that sometimes I could trust myself enough to sort of manifest something, in a much bigger way than whatever small picture perspective I've got. And on that occasion, it was really it blew me away. This cinematographer, he wound up coming on a couple of my events, interviewed me for this documentary. The 2-page spread came out, and it was a really good sort of, review of the event. And it was better than anything I currently had in my mind because I was playing it small. Sometimes we have to sort of stop playing it small and start playing it big. But in order to stop playing it small and play it big, it doesn't have to be gigantic steps. It can literally be very digestible baby steps. Micro steps to achieve, that macro result. And that, really taught me, in these last few years, really how powerful we are, how immensely amazing this universe is. And the more you trust yourself, the more courageous you get, life changes. And it becomes so fun. I'm not just growing through pain anymore. That's still there. I still grow painfully now and again. But there seems to be getting less and less of it. And I know a big part of it is, hooking up with this young lady over here. Which, I'm deeply honored for. And even, the synchronicity that brought us together. This stuff's powerful. But again, we both trusted ourselves on the weekend that we met. We trusted what we were doing in order to get to that weekend individually was right for us. And the moment we met, that was even magic. I remember I was invited as a facilitator to come and facilitate at this event, and it was out in the in a place called Hollycombe Retreat Center in the Cotswolds. And Cotswolds are a beautiful part of England. And I hitchhiked on the way to the event, and the other facilitator said to me, look, you you sure you don't want me to pick you up? Because it's going to take you a long time from where you're at. There's lots of farm tracks and dirt roads, and probably won't make it, and you'll be late. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I know what I'm doing with this stuff, and I trust that I'll be okay. And, I got to a point to where one last lift, I knew the farm tracks and dirt roads were coming up, so I sort of just had lunch in this little pub, and I still had enough time, and I was really trusting. And I finished my lunch and I went out and I stood by, this dirt road, and this first, person that came by picked me up, and he was like, yeah, you got a real chore getting from where you're at to where you want to be. And just through talking, just sharing with him, it sort of opened him up. And maybe I was suddenly meeting a few of his core needs, which I didn't understand at that time, but intuitively it was being met, and suddenly he was just like really having a blast talking with me and sharing. And he said, what the hell, I'll drive you all the way there. And I was the one the first to arrive. The other first facilitator didn't arrive yet. And so I dropped down my bag and I thought, okay, nobody's here, so I'll go for a walk. And I went for a walk and I got up on this hill. And as soon as I got up at the top of this hill, I looked down and there was this person, this human, twirling around inside of a labyrinth. And I was like, how interesting, I'm drawn to this creature. And so wander back down the hill and wander behind the house where this labyrinth is, and this beautiful fairy sort of just twirling in this vortex of energy, and I'm just standing in awe watching. And then she turns and she gets really bashful. She's like, "Ooh, somebody's watching." And she walks towards me and I walk towards her, and we just sort of, as we get close, where our eyes just meet, we just sort of suddenly turn and we're walking, as if we were picking up from a previous lifetime. And it just felt so deeply good. But again, because I trusted, and she trusted. And she had her own reasons to have doubt. I had my own reasons to have doubt. Even the facilitator I was going to work with, I had doubts about her. But I talked to those parts of me. And I realized once again there are gifts. The doubt is just a test. It's to say, are you really ready? Do you really want to go this route? And I chose to. And the gifts just keep coming. I'm blessed, and all of you are blessed, but it's that trusting, it's that deep trust and that courage. A couple of years ago, my diet here on physical level, there was something in my diet which I didn't realize was causing me, I knew there was something in my diet that was causing me pain, because every day, there seemed to be something, but I didn't know what it was. And I had an out-of-body experience, and this is on one of these true heavenly environments. We have like the mid-astral, where you have like all the great religions have like a counterpart level to where they have their respective sort of communities, which aren't, they're the places where their constituents will stay, for eternity, but let them have their fun there. It's an illusion with an illusion. That's cool. They'll get a lot of learning from those places. But on these true heavenly environments, on the very higher astral, where communities really do work in harmony, I met this sort of family unit who didn't come together out of, sort of being a mother and a father and children, but because they had a desire to connect and their souls were working together. And the mother, the one that seems like the mother of this group, has a real motherly energy. Whenever I arrive, and I've been there maybe 4 times now, she really mothers me too. She smothers me in this sort of love. And she was like, "Ooh, you're unwell a little bit, aren't you? There's something not quite well when you're not here." And she said, she was just tuning into my earth body, and she was like, "It's some kind of juice." And I was like, "Juice?" And she said, "It's some sort of juice." And she was describing it to me, and I was like, "Oh, you mean cow's milk?" And so and she goes, "Yes, that's it, that's what it is." And she goes, "You need to let go of that." And so I was like, okay, and I got back to my body and instantly scratched the milk out of my diet. And within a few days, I didn't have those issues anymore that I was having. I was having little tummy upsets here and there, and that was all gone. And it was just, this is just fantastic. I can go to another level and get some advice from somebody and come back and boom, it's different. And there was another time I was on the astral. This was like, the mid-astral, and I thought, I want to go clubbing. And so I found this place where, there was a club sort of scene, and I was there, I was having a bit of a dance, a bit of a jig and all this. And I came out afterwards, and right across the street was this hair emporium. And it's like a hair emporium, wow. I had all my big curly hair at the time. Some of you remember, it was this big curly, and when I'm out of body, it's even more. It's just like, watch out, small children. So I went over to this hair emporium. I was just really drawn to it. And I went in, and immediately the sort of owner of this hair emporium, he's like, he looks at my hair and he's like, "Oh, come sit." And he sat, and immediately he's sort of digging into my scalp, and he's just like, "Oh, what is this?" And he was reading me again, my physical body. He was like, does your head, does it itch? And I was like, yeah, for the week or so leading up to that, it really got, I guess imbalanced, and it was a lot of itching, and he was, yes. There's something on your level that can deal with this, that will remedy this. And he gave me the name of something. And I got back to my body, and I wrote it down, and I went to the health food shop, and bam, they had it on the shelf. I put it in my hair, on my scalp, massaged it in, and it just soothed my scalp. And then I did some research on it and found it was like one of the closest things to our own sebum, our own sort of scalp oil. And it doesn't clog pores and all this. I'm just like, whoa, fantastic. And again, it was just a remedy that was, taken from another level of reality. They're able to see sometimes these bigger pictures. We can do the same here. But sometimes we're playing it so small, we don't see the bigger picture. There's actually a book that we found last year, which is called Playing It Big. It's a business book. But see, this is just it. We're not just spiritual teachers, we're business people as well. And it's the same for you. Sometimes spiritual teachers, spiritual facilitators, they struggle with the money side of things, sometimes with the poverty consciousness, etc. And this book really helps a lot. It helps really put things in perspective. And this was a really no-nonsense woman. Her name's Lynn somebody. But the book is Playing It Big. Playing It Big. And really it helped us a lot. So, just ask yourself, do you find yourself in this special effects team or the subpersonalities, sometimes really making you feel like really small and that you don't want to shine too bright or some kind of things like this, and I'm not ready. So, you hear these in spiritual circles sometimes, divine timing. So it wasn't quite my time yet. There's a part of you that is always ready. You just have to really sort of, again, trust yourself and have the courage. And I know the first few times, if things don't quite work out to your expectation, then you just adapt that. And you say, look, it's cool to have an expectation, but use that self-awareness not to beat the crap out of yourself when the expectation doesn't quite work out in the way that you expected it. Because sometimes your expectation gets exceeded in a fucking good way. And again, it's one of those gifts, the reality just showing you, look, this is exciting. This is bigger than what you might think it is. This is bigger than what even the universe might think it is. So, now reality sort of, to a point now where it's fun here, it's fun there. All kinds of interchange going on. Whatever I learn there, I can apply here. Whatever I experience here can be applied there. And I started at some point a few years ago moving into environments where, like I said early hours of this morning, where I would suddenly start teaching. I'd just show up somewhere while I'd come out of body and a wormhole would open up and I'd start teaching. And on one occasion, I was teaching this class on the astral, and William Bowman walks in. I was like, wow, that's William Bowman. I was like, he sat there in a chair to listen to my lecture. I was like, I got all nervous. And I got back into my body on that occasion, and I wrote William a message, and I said, William, I was out of body last night, I was teaching on the astral, and you showed up. And he wrote back to me and he said, yes, Todd, you and I, we teach often on the astral. And, it's because we've learned to really trust ourselves here. And we're now become useful there too, because we're conscious here and there. And he said, we've become conduits, and the universe will sort of guide us. And he was explaining some of the ideas behind this, that, when we get out of our bodies, it's not like we're scheduled, to teach a certain class. It's just like we get out of our bodies and the universe has just got all those feelers out. And it's just like, vibrationally, there's somebody there. He can teach. She can teach. Wormhole pulls you in. When you arrive, download just kicks in. And you know exactly what you're there for. And you just learn to trust that too. And have the courage to actually, present the material you're being given. And I've come back from some of those experiences and I'm just like, it feels like a full circle almost. I remember when I was a child and I started having these experiences from age 6. And I'd be met by some of the same individuals. I'd meet some children, and we'd be taken to places. Whitley Schreiber, he talks about aliens, sort of ET stuff, and he talks about these great sort of mystery schools. And when I used to read his books, I always wondered how they would arrive. Were they sort of being taken by UFO to places? And I suddenly realized, because William Bowman also in his one of his books, he explains the phenomena that's very similar with the sort of abduction, the classic abduction, where you hear people say things like, I was suddenly in paralysis and I couldn't move. And I was then levitated away from my bed and through, a sort of a wall. And then there were bright lights and there was these beams. And then you got the classic OB sort of experience where you've got paralysis and you float up away from your body. And there's bright lights, and then you meet other beings, and they're just so similar. Mm-hmm. And so he's explaining this stuff in the book and this sort of stuff, and I'm just thinking, okay, this is really quite interesting. So I can understand where maybe how they got to the mystery schools wasn't just, sort of abduction, but also through out-of-body experiences. And I now understood that, deeper and deeper, that what was taking place with me as a child when I was having these experiences, yes, these were out-of-body experiences, and it's just more validation. And there was this one experience where I came out of my body. This was just a few years ago now. Came out of my body. I'm living in Wembley in London. And I walked through the wall of my flat, and I'm outdoors, and I'm very rarely on the near-Earth field where everything's in real time and it's as crisp and clear. And I know if I walk into a neighbor's house, it would be the real neighbor's house, and whatever they're doing, I could see it in I could witness it in real time. And this was the early hours of the morning, and I suddenly got this tug on my energy, and it sort of shot me up in the air like Superman. I was like, oh, I'm enjoying this, and I'm just flying up into the atmosphere, right up into space. And I'm now, like on the Google cardboard, there's one on there called Google Earth, and when it says flying to space, and when you're up there, you're above the world. And you've got this big blue-green water world below you, Earth. And you can see all the curvature of the Earth. And on this occasion, I rose that high up into the atmosphere, and I was there just above the Earth, and I had Africa right below me, and just suspended above the planet. And it's just like so breathtaking, so awe-inspiring. And I'm there, and suddenly I see this form sort of shooting up from, it's more telepathic than anything, because they're just teeny tiny little forms, and then they're kind of getting closer and closer and closer. And then as they're getting closer, I'm getting this download that I'm going to be teaching children who are just coming out of their bodies on this night, like me when I was 6 years old. And then boom, that full circle. Where it was me being taken somewhere, now it was other children coming to me. And they arrive, and they're all just hovering there, and they're like thinking they're in a dream. And I'm saying to them, I'm here to teach you how to teleport from one part of the world to another. Where would you like to go? And they were really shy about it, and I said, why don't we visit the Great Pyramids first? Has anyone been? I said, let's go to the pyramids. And so I brought them all close to my energy, and I taught them, and we went to the pyramids, and then we went to the Amazon, and we're bouncing around every place. And then one of them said, can we go into space? Remember I said, sometimes you lose a few in space. And I got really excited. I said, of course we can go to space. And that was like a command, when you're out of body. And suddenly I shoot away from all these children like a rocket, right into space and right into another dimension of reality. And I left my charges just there. Where did you go? And I remember being on this other level and thinking, I hope at least just one of them, when they get back to their bodies and they wake up and they go to the breakfast table, they're like, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy! There was this man, he had all this hair, and he took us to the Amazon, and we went to the pyramids, and out of 5 or 6 of the children that were there, maybe just one of them would remember. And remember and think in a way like that was different. There was something about that, Mommy. Nah, it was just a dream, little Johnny. No, Mommy, no. There's something more. And it was just so special to have one of these experiences where it goes full circle. And you just really feel a part of, you're taking part in something bigger. You're making a bigger contribution. When I was in my teenage years, I was a very awkward teenager. I'd just come out of, age 12, the out-of-body stuff sort of ended. I still had all these grandiose ideas about reality, and I always felt like I was a boy out of time. I belonged in the future or in the past, like a pirate or something. And I remember being at school, I'd always sit at the end of the playground during recess, and I'd just look up into the sky and just wonder about stuff. And all the other kids, I'd usually get teased a lot, and I made an epic mistake one day and wore a t-shirt that said, E.T. lives. And I kind of looked like Elliot, with the haircut and all this, and I was known as E.T. for the rest of the year. And it was just like, it was bad, but, I always sort of felt, even at that age, that, there was something more to reality. There was something more than what I was seeing on the surface. And even, like I said, even at that age, it just felt like a real deep knowing. And I think all that, all the life leading up to now, it's that, again, it's some courage, some level of courage kept me going in all those years where I felt like, I was always being mentally bullied by kids that didn't understand me. And I didn't know how to connect with people in certain ways, but it all worked out. It all worked out. I'm now sort of here doing something that I really cherish doing, that I really feel honored to be doing. And all these experiences that I have where, like William Bullman says, we got to a certain level now where we're in service on other levels. We're useful to the universe in other levels. And I've had experiences where it shows me that we all have, these counterpart selves on other levels of reality. And have you ever sort of maybe woke up in the morning and suddenly got this bee in your body? There's something you must do. And it's probably because another part of you, another part of your consciousness experienced something while out of body or on a dream, in the astral or in a dream, and you were instructed to do something, but you can't remember that part of it, but you've just suddenly got a bee in your body. You're doing stuff already on these other levels. You're probably teaching yourselves, teaching, as teachers. You're probably learning energy mechanics, and you're starting to get interested in Reiki. You're starting to get interested in Qigong out of the blue. It just comes back, and you're like, why all of a sudden do I feel this connection to this? And it's probably because you're being mentored out of body, and you're just not remembering the experience, but they are happening. An example of that on one of my out-of-body journeys, which I just love. I remember sitting in this kind of hotel lobby, and there was a sort of a bar, and I was just sort of really in a daze, as you are sometimes, like a zombie on these levels when you haven't had a conscious transition. And I'm just sort of there, and I'm just sort of looking, and I'm like, yeah, this is like a hotel lobby. But I wasn't much more conscious than that. And these two young women walk by, probably early 20s, and one stops dead in her tracks, and she looks down at me, and she sits down, thigh to thigh, and she takes her right leg and crosses over my leg, and she leans right into me, and she's like, right here, and she starts whispering, as she's got her lips on my face. She says, "You're that guy that teaches people weird stuff." She's like, "What?" And I said, "How do you know this?" And my awareness started going up a little bit. And she said, "My mother told me who you are." And I was like, my awareness going up a little bit more. Who's your mother? And right then and there, where I'm expecting to get an answer, her friend, who's standing up looking really bored and irritated, says, such and such a name, like, "Tracy, leave that old guy alone. Let's get out of here." I was like, "Old guy? What?" And then my awareness just went right up by that time. I was like, "Old guy." But, the one girl, I don't know who she was, but may have been, just that little push I needed to become conscious, where I would have never become conscious, but I was still there on the astral. I had drifted between, sleep cycles, that deep into another level of reality without doing anything myself consciously about it. Or maybe I did, and then I fell unconscious, but there I was, and I had been woken up by an astral resident. I've been to some of these really big mega cities on the astral, which I'm hoping Jürgen will talk about tomorrow night, and I'm going to leave that for him to talk about. But some of these cities are just 10 times bigger than any earthbound city. And they're ancient. They are really ancient in comparison to the cities that we have here, to this physical level of reality. And I remember wandering around on one occasion in this city that had a monorail system, and I got on board one of the monorails, and I was just about to get off at this one stop, and I just got sort of caught on this woman's bag, and I kicked it. And I was mortified. I was like, "I'm so sorry." And she just looked at me, and she looked right into my energy. And she smiled, and she goes, "That's okay, traveler." She knew I wasn't from that level. And the warm feeling that she filled me with her love, to say, "I know you're from one of these other levels, and it's really nice to see someone from those levels here conscious." And you could just feel that exchange, and it was so beautiful. And again, these things happen because in that first year, where I was doing that bottom-up practice, where I was just using HemiSync and nothing else, didn't add anything to it. HemiSync is a good tool, and it works really well for some, but it didn't work very well for me just on its own. I needed something more. And in that first year, there were so many times I could have given up. You're here for, you're here for 9 days, but you're here for 7 days of, deep energy, sort of penetrating all this energy that's taking place with your subpersonalities and the mood swings and, the tiredness. I did this for a year. You're doing this for 7 days with me. And I am going to put you through your paces. And I am going to ask you to dig deeper into those reserves that maybe you don't know are there, but I know are. I know you have reserves within reserves within reserves. If you haven't discovered them yet, discover them here with us. We'll hold the space for you. If you want to cry on our shoulders, come and cry on our shoulders. We've already had some tears. I had one shirt ruined yesterday. I'll send my bill. We're here for that. Cry on our shoulders. If I'm wearing a white t-shirt, no mascara though, okay? One of the synchronicity walks I did maybe about 4 years ago now, we were standing on a street corner. I was sort of giving the instruction on what sort of we do on the night as such, where we just trust ourselves, etc. This woman just sort of made a beeline for us, and she wasn't part of the group that signed up for it, but she just thought we were a little oddity, so she'd come over and have a look, and she was listening intently, and she asked me if I had a card because she had to go somewhere else. She had a meeting. I said, yeah, here, take a card. And she wrote me this long email the next day. She said, I'm a channeler, and I'm from Germany. I'm here living now in the UK. And I had a weird experience the night before I met your group. She said, I had this spontaneous out-of-body experience. And in the experience, there was a man. And the man said that we needed to be able to communicate more regularly, and that she needed to be able to travel in this way. And that she needed to find an earthbound teacher to help her do this. But that would be sorted out very quickly. And she said, so she saw us that night, and it just felt right to come up to us. And she came up, she was really inspired by what we were talking about and doing, and she took my card, and she said she just put her card in her pocket, and she didn't think much more about it. She got home that night, she typed in the address, and here I am teaching out-of-body exploration. And she was just like, I just booked straight onto your tower workshop, straight on, because I knew this is what this out-of-body experience was. This last night was telling me to do. And so her name's Rhiannon, and Rhiannon came along to the workshop, and the whole weekend we had to think at the weekend workshop we cram in something like 5 or 6 90-minute sessions into the weekend. Try to give people as much as they can get, because it's they're just there a short few days with me. And I remember her getting a little bit despondent because nothing was happening. And in the last session on the Sunday, before we go home, 5 minutes of the session left. She can hear. She was already used to the track. She knew what was happening. It was about to come to an end. And then she just gave up. She just said, that's it. It's not going to happen. I'm just going to give in. I'm letting go. And in that moment, she got out of the way. She was trying too hard. She was in her head. If you're in your head, you're staying in your body. And she just completely relaxed and let go of it all. And she shot right out of her body. She went straight home to Germany, had a really amazing experience, came flying back to London, slammed into her body, sort of skidded back in. And she got up and she gave me this big hug. And she said, thank you, thank you for this. And I said, no, thank you for trusting. Thank you for that night when you saw us in the corner and you trusted to come. You didn't even know what we were doing. We're just a nondescript group standing on a street corner. We could have been, drug dealers. We could have been sort of hell, who knows? But she trusted and she came. And then not only just did she come, to sort of find us on that night, but to trust to come to the tower. And even in that last minute where, she gave in, there was probably something deeper in her that was saying, let go at this moment. You've been holding on too tight. You've been trying to control this too much. You've been trying to use all these other ideas that you've been exposed to before, and right now you just have to trust this process. And she let go, and boom, something magical happened. So anyhow, Rhiannon stayed in touch. And I was out of body on one occasion, and this wormhole had opened up, and it, I went in, and it dropped me off on this sort of points on the astral, and it was like kind of a real swampy type environment. And I remember being on this little island bit with this water around me, and there were residents of that place on the other side, and they were listening to what I was saying, And there were like reptiles everywhere. There were sort of crocodiles or alligators and sort of snakes. And then suddenly Rhiannon appears. She's standing on the bank. And I'm like all excited, like, oh my God, it's Rhiannon. I'm like, wow, I get to share an experience with somebody that I've trained. And she looks at me and her face brightens and she knows who it is. And I said, Rhiannon, come over. And she looks down and she sees all these snakes and reptiles. And I'm like, Rhiannon, it's okay. They're not going to harm you. It's just like every creature in that space was just in balance and nothing was sort of attacking anything. And I said, come, it's okay. But you could see her energy was starting to sort of fade a little bit because of the fear that she had about the reptiles. And then suddenly she was gone. And so I woke back into my body and I sent her a text and I said, did you have an experience this morning with me? And we got on the telephone and we were talking and she said, yes. I didn't tell her what I experienced. She said, I had suddenly appeared and it was like a bog. And I was like, yeah, a swamp. And she says, yes, that's right. And I remember you were asking me to walk across some water, but there was these snakes and it really scared me. I don't like snakes very much. And I kind of just, suddenly lost the energy and I was back in my body. And I was like, that was really nice. And that was the beginning of sharing something like 7 or 8 shared out-of-body journeys with her in the period of months. We went horseback riding together on another occasion. We rode motorcycles on a counterpart level for Scotland. Really creating deep bond with somebody on this level of reality, being able to share an experience with. And it was really a lot of fun to be able to have an adventure with another person that I knew on this level of reality who had got to a point of being able to travel in the way that she was capable of doing. And a couple of years ago, I invited Rhiannon to come and channel at one of the Ireland 9-day events. So we were there and we were thinking about, okay, why don't we do a shared talk one of the evenings? We inspire each other. We'll start off with our shared journeys, just to sort of, prime people. And then we'll sort of take turns in sharing one of our big experiences, one of our individual experiences, and then maybe we'll leave it as a cliffhanger, and then we'll go to Rhiannon and she'll get up to a point in her story, leave it as a cliffhanger, come back to me, I'll finish the story. And it was just really beautiful that, the way this was playing out. And so I said to her, okay, yeah, go in and have a moment to think about what you'll talk about, what experiences you're going to share. And the experience that she shared, that she kept leaving us, on the edge of our seats, I never heard about. She never told me. So she started off and she said, okay, so she started off with meeting me, how she met me, and this man that said it was important that they meet out of body and that she must get trained for this. Within months of her training at the tower, she was now meeting with this individual on another level of reality, and this individual had got her to one of these great healing environments on the astral. This was one of her guides. And this guide had cause to be concerned because, unbeknownst to Rhiannon at the time, she had cancer. And it wasn't her time to depart the earth plane. And they wanted this to be remedied. And so they got her to the healing centers in the astral and they started giving her healing. And they gave her a specific diet to follow when she got back to earth. And so she came back to earth and she went to the hospital, checked this out, and she did. She had cancer. She was diagnosed with stage 4. And then she was instructed by the guidance on the astral not to tell other people because other people would fear for her and their energy would create a negativity on the manifestation. And so she was to keep it to herself and that she had the support on the astral. She had, this team on the astral that would look after her and give her that extra energy she needed. And so she didn't go down the conventional route, to conquer, this imbalance. She followed the strict instructions that she was given, and within less than a few months had eradicated the cancer completely, and it has not come back. And over the period of, the evening, she slowly told the story. It wasn't as succinct as I just spoke of it. It was really deep. It was really touching. To hear about the care that is available to us, not just on this level of reality, but on these other levels too. And not just on those other levels do you get this sort of support. That support is here too. This is one of the things that we're doing, and we're very conscious that we're doing. We're doing our best to create a support here for those who feel unsupported, for those who feel lost, who feel they want to be part of something bigger too. This is our role. We're here for that, and we're connected to doing this, and we're inspired by doing this. When you come every year, different groups come, and we get inspired by your experiences. We get inspired by your courage. I remember the very first experiences I ran at the tower workshops. After the very first one, I swore blind I would never run another one. I was worked to the bone. And although I had some amazing experiences, I was left a wreck. I'd given all my energy. I didn't really know how to I literally stretched myself thin. I used to be fat. And the second time I ran it at the tower again, I swore afterwards I would never do this again. And it was almost like 4 experiences later, I was still swearing I was never going to do it again. And I'm really glad I didn't give up. I'm really glad I didn't give in, like I'd done at other points in my life. When things just started getting a little bit testing, I gave up. So many times in the past. That 1 year I spent trying to get out of my body and then realized, I needed extra tools. I needed that top-down approach. And boom, it started to happen. But I was committed. I was like that pig in the egg and bacon breakfast. I was fully committed. Since those early tower days, yes, my courage was tested. But I found new levels of willpower. I found new levels of strength, courage. And I'm asking you to do the same. No matter how you feel mid-week, it's like that midweek hump. You're ready to go over the top. But this is your journey. It's not mine. This is your journey. You're the one that has to show up. You're the one that has to say, I was so excited months ago and now I'm feeling so low. You have to show up. You have to fully be here. When the special effects team come, remember, they're just offering those special effects just to help keep the illusions intact that little bit longer because it's going to refine your energy that much more. Your soul is going to get that much more of an enhancement in its illumination because you pushed yourself that much further than you thought you could be pushed. And that was nothing in comparison to how far you can actually go. I said earlier, no, I'll wait for that. So I've sort of had all these experiences on the astral, sometimes the high astral, sometimes the very higher planes of consciousness, a few times on the soul planes, and I've had a lot of magical sort of past life experiences, which I now sort of would label parallel experiences, where I've met other versions of myself, also embedded in Earth-type realities, physical matter worlds also scattered amongst this sort of multiverse. And so I knew there were human colonies on the astral. I knew we were one here on physical Earth. But I always wondered, was there any other human colonies? Because you read about stuff sometimes, and I thought, I really want to know. I want to know. Because that little boy that sat there at the end of that school field, feeling out of time, wondering, if there's something more. And I was always dreaming of, other humans on other worlds, and maybe one would stop by someday at the end of this playing field and sort of just wander up, while the other children weren't looking and just sort of talk to me and share some secrets of the universe. And I thought, you know what? On this occasion, I'm going to honor that part of me that kept that faith out of all that ridicule I received at that age. He had faith. He had guts. I'm going to honor that. I got out of my body on that occasion and I thought, I'm going to stretch my consciousness as far as I've ever stretched it before. How far can I push this? I got out of body and I just was feeling it. I was really tuning into this big conscious field. And I was feeling for another human tribe. And I was just sort of really stretching and stretching and stretching, and suddenly there was this signal. And I got that tug like Monroe talks about, and I followed that signal. And went through wormhole, went through other sort of weird sort of energy fluctuations, and then after what seemed a bit of time, I suddenly arrive to a near physical frequency, to another physical matter world in our physical universe. And I was hovering above this world, and it was a blue-green water world just like ours. And suddenly I got another tug, and I zoned in on one particular sort of location on this planet, and I was suddenly in a field that didn't look too much different from Earth. There was vegetation, and there were children, human children, and they were playing in this field. Typical games that we might play, with slight tweaks. And as they were all running by, and I was just there with my energy, and I was so happy, and I was feeling that little boy on the school field all alone, here now with these children. And I felt so at ease. He felt so, validated. I could feel that inner part of me just healing, deeply healing that hurt that had been there for so many years. And suddenly, one of the children stopped dead in front of me, looked straight at my energy. And she said, "Who are you?" I was like, "I'm Acamesis." And she said, "Where did you come from?" I said, "I live in your universe, but I come from another place, around another star, far from here." And she said, How did you get here?" She said, her clairvoyance was just fully tuned in. She was a really powerful little clairvoyant. And I said to her, "I just believed. I knew you were here. I wanted to find you. Part of me needed to find you." And I said, I just trusted, and I found you. Her name is Manos. And she said, "Will you come back, Acamesis?" I said, I'll definitely keep you in my thoughts." It was such a beautiful moment. It wouldn't have come if I didn't trust myself. Some of the experiences I had prior to this one, I've talked about, that I might share some of my ET experiences. Some of the ET experiences I had where I experienced deep manipulation, one of them which traumatized me for a whole year. But it didn't stop me from having out-of-body experiences. But if I would have let it stop me, that inner child would probably still be hurting, sitting at the end of a school field, feeling so alone. That was such a powerful healing for me. Maybe I'm a legend now in another world. Who knows? But it kind of reminds me of a story by Richard Bach. Do you know Richard Bach? He wrote the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull. At the beginning of one of his other books, titled Illusions, his handwritten notes for one summer in the fields barnstorming with Donald Shamunda, this reluctant messiah. In his handwritten notes, he talks about these bottom cleaners. And he says, there's this stream, and there's this community of beings who just sort of cling to the bottom. That's their life. That's all they know. They just cling to what they know. They play it small. Too fearful that if they let go, they'll get smashed against the rocks. The current will just sort of smash them against the rocks. It's a very powerful current. And one finally decides, always has these questions. What's further down, this environment? What's further down this river? I wonder what would happen if I let go. And all the other sort of bottom sort of clingers are like, "Don't be silly, you can't let go. This is our life. We have to cling. To cling to all these ideas, cling to these beliefs. We have to stay here." And he's like, "I'm just not sure about this. There's something telling me I have to let go." "No, don't let go. You'll die. You'll get smashed into the rocks." No. And he lets go. And they're like, "Oh, there he goes." And sure enough, they were right. He got smashed against the rocks, impaled against stuff, tumbled and scratched and bruised, and got around the bend in the river, and they all thought, "Oh, we told him so. He's dead now. Should have listened to us and stayed here. Still be alive." Alive. Went around the bend, and the current lifted him, slightly broken, but lifted him up to the surface of the river, where it was much more placid now, not so much of a struggle. And he's floating down river and he gets this new wind and he's just like in awe. And he's suddenly sort of like he's flying above what he knew before. And he gets around another bend and there's another community of cleaners and they're like, holy fuck! And they look out, it's one of us! And he flies! And they're like, oh. But did they not know? Of course they did not know that he was one of them, and he just decided to have a little bit more courage, to trust himself. And sure, he got battered and bruised along the way of trusting and having courage. But it worked out. It worked out quite a great deal. I hear he now sort of runs some sort of, community center somewhere further downstream, and he's written a few books. And I've kind of mentioned here and there, very sort of briefly, about sometimes you get up in the early hours, like 4 a.m., like I would do, and you get this feeling, immediate feeling. You know that if you just lay down now, you're going to have an experience. Or maybe you're out wandering, London, like I've done, and suddenly get a feeling, tonight I'm going to have an experience. You can just feel it sometimes, in advance, well in advance. And on my hitchhiking trip a couple years ago, the Synchronicity hitchhiking trip, it culminated with a friend of mine who's got a lot of houses all over the world. And he lives in Hong Kong predominantly, and he's got a house in Malta. And he got in contact with me on Facebook. He said, Todd, I see you're hitchhiking around. He goes, I'm going down to Malta. I'm going to be driving from Dover. Do you want to meet me there? And we'll go across on the ferry. We'll go through the Alps and down through Italy. We'll get on another ferry and then we'll cruise on down to Malta. And I was like, that sounds awesome. So I said, yeah, I'll hitchhike over to Dover and you can pick me up and we'll go. And a little bit of vanity was going on, my hair at the time, big curls, and I was just thinking to myself, and I was high manifestation mode, everything was manifesting, and I was just thinking, I hope he doesn't have a convertible, because my hair was just, and I just shouldn't have done that. If I show up and he has a convertible, and it's just like, when you're in that manifestation zone, when you're in that flow, it's just like, don't think things you don't want. So I meet up with him, hook up, and on the way down, it took us 3 or 4 days to get down with the ferry crossing and sort of the driving. And I could suddenly feel this strong energy. And I knew what it was, but this was different. This was really strong, really powerful, like it was never before. And every day I waited, and every day it was there again, but nothing was happening at night. We get down to Malta, and he's got this 4-story townhouse right on the waterfront. And he's showing me all the different sort of bedrooms and the whole place, and then he goes, I got a real surprise for you downstairs in the basement. And we went downstairs in the basement, and he opens this big iron sort of gate, and this light comes on from sensor lighting, and it's this cave that has been sort of hewed out right behind his house, a basement level, and there's a hole in the top where the sunshine comes in, and it's sort of been whitewashed, all the rock has been whitewashed, and there's this brand new chaise lounge chair right in the center above the hole where the light comes in or where you can see the stars at night, and a speaker system, a surround sound, and I'm like, oh. And he goes, yes, Todd, this is where you can do your OBE stuff. You're happy, you can have this. And I was like, yes, please. And I was so much like a little kid. And a couple nights went by and I still had that strong energy, but the experience just still wasn't happening. And then finally it came. And I got out of my body. And up until that time, I probably had at least 10 ET experiences that freaked me out big time. And it was the same sort of species of ET. And so on this occasion, so I get out of my body, and I thought to myself, I haven't been to the soul level in a long time, and I'd like to go there. And so suddenly I'm moving through these different layers. I'm just feeling this sort of perception of movements. But it's just my mind being so conditioned with movements. And I'm moving through these different layers, and suddenly sort of my ascension came to a halt. And I was in like this void. And then suddenly I could feel a presence, that there was something there with me, and it was as if somebody just turned up the lights, and it was one of these ETs from the species that had sort of pestered me for many years and traumatized me, to be honest. And immediately I recoiled. I was like, no, I don't want to be here. And I started to sort of make motions to go, and suddenly it felt like my energy was being slightly contained, and I had this telepathic sort of message and to relax, and that it was okay. I wasn't here to hurt you. And I sort of loosened, and this being's energy just completely opened to me. Whereas before it was just a really manipulative energy from this species. Its energy just opened to me. And I've never felt such power in energy. It was true depths of love. It was a real deep level of compassion and kindness. And it just opened its energy and it said, just feel into me. I'm not here to hurt you. I know the others have. I'm not here for that. And so I calmed down because I really was feeling, the nature of this being's sort of evolution. And I immediately tuned in to its human lifetimes. It had done the human journey like we're doing it right now. And there was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes that had gone through it. The best of humanity, the worst of humanity, and everything in between. It got the full flavor of what it was to be human. And like Robert Monroe would say, it eventually graduated. It became one of these human graduates. And it left that system. It left this system. And it went on to this other system, which is an adjacent system to ours. And it became, sort of its soul parked itself on the edge of that reality and sent in, it's like the mothership, and it sent in the scout ships, these parts, which are us. And the scout ship went down and got deeply into the dream on those levels, fell into unconsciousness. But the bigger part, the mothership, didn't fall into any unconsciousness. Let all of this unfold, knowing that, it would all be okay. This part would come back enhanced. And it was here with me, and I was now feeling into its energy. It was on the vanguard of its system of consciousness. It was at the top. It was near graduation day for this being. It was a human graduate, and it was now about to graduate this system, which to us, for any of you who've experienced this species, they come across as cold and unemotional and manipulative. But here this being was part of the species, something completely different. This caliber of evolution which was just off the radar. Up until that time, I'd never met a being of such magnitude. Even my own soul or other souls on the soul plane that I've met, nothing like it. And it started to communicate to me. It wasn't a male energy or a female energy as such, but I kind of relayed to it as a male energy in my own way. And it opened to me, and it was communicating this message. It said, in my time, in your world, the earth sort of world, I experienced all the hurt. I experienced all the pain, and I've experienced that in the sort of environment I'm in now. And I know how much pain and suffering takes place in some of these, form-based matter realities. I know how lost you can feel. But he said, there's so much potential. And he was showing me, suddenly, his level of ability to create was off the charts. He created this sort of simulation, like what Tom Campbell talks about, and he created this simulation of Earth. And he populated it with all this sort of autotomic life, like a holodeck on a starship, Enterprise, something like that. And he said, I'd like to sort of take your consciousness and sort of impregnate it into one of these, human lives within this hologram, within this simulation. And I'd like to run it from birth all the way up through sort of childhood, all the way up through adult years, up into some, those twilight years. And I'd like to show you first what it is like to be a creative type, like your Leonardo da Vinci. And he said, I'd like to show you, the potential of all humanity. And so we'll start with this creative mind. And so he sort of inserts my consciousness into one of these forms, and I'm a baby, and I'm growing up as a boy, and I'm being tutored by masters, within the arts. And my creativity is being expressed in a way that's never been expressed in this body, with this personality. And I'm feeling all of this, and my consciousness is being enhanced by all of this. These are real, genuine experiences I'm having, and it's just being fast-forwarded through this life. Like he's got this dial, and it's just like suddenly I jump from age 8 to age 12 to age 16 to age 20, and I'm going through all these years. And it's like the dial is turning from 0 up to 10, with 10 being the sort of the most creative potential I could express as a human being, the most potential that could be sort of actualized. And we get up to about a 6 on that dial, and he said, this is about where Leonardo da Vinci was right there. As creative as this mind was, as creative as this personality was, there was much more. There was much more to be expressed. And so he sort of pulled my consciousness out of that experience, and I was just like, oh, that was amazing. And he said, in your world, I know you're a teacher. And I'd like to show you your potential. And again, he sort of balls up my energy and he inserts it into, one of these forms. And I'm now growing up as me again. Slight enhancements, slight tweaks along the way. And pathways sort of, you can feel slight differences. And again, all of this is enhancing me because these are real experiences. That is real to my mind right then and there. And it's all being fast-forwarded through again. And I'm going through these years and I'm seeing this stuff and I'm feeling this stuff and experiencing this stuff. And it gets up to about, a 2 or 3 or 4 and I'm comfortable. And then I suddenly get into a 5 or a 6 and I'm feeling really stretched. And I suddenly start feeling pain. Deep emotional pain, real hurt. And I asked him to stop. I said, you have to stop. Please stop. And he pulled my energy out. And he asked why I asked him to stop. And I knew he already knew. But he wanted me to say it. And I said, because I didn't feel worthy of what I was experiencing. I didn't feel what you were showing me was my potential. I just don't feel that's possible for me. And he said, I know. I've been there many times. And he was imparting this idea of trust to me in his own way. And courage to me in his own way. And faith in his own way. To keep going. And so we finished off the experience, with him sort of leaving me with some sort of packets of information. And he said, don't try to digest any more of this now. Wait till you get back to your world and take some time to meditate. And it'll make sense. And I remember coming back to my body. And I woke back into this cave on this lounge chair. And I just wasn't the same human being I was an hour before or whatever time it was. And I remember weeks after that journey, it just wasn't the same. The ET species I'd become so racist against, I was suddenly now, this being had shown me the best of humanity, the worst of humanity. He showed me the best of his species, the worst of his species. He showed me all those parallels between these different sort of civilizations, but all of it leading to something beautiful. Because there are so many individuals within these spaces trusting there is more than just their pain. Trusting there is something more than their suffering. Having the courage to keep going, to keep pushing. Not stopping just before they potentially were getting somewhere. It reminded me of an experience of Robert Monroe's. He talks about this in his third book, Ultimate Journey. He talks about, for many years, he wanted to have a particular type of experience, and his guides kept saying, it's not possible. And years go by, and Monroe's out of body, and he visits that sort of, on the edge, I guess, of where he calls it the eye there, and his two inspect sort of friends. And again, he puts it to him, and they say, yes, Mr. Monroe, we know what you want. And it's now possible. You want to meet the most developed human that is currently on your world, in your timeline right now. It's now possible. We can take you there. And Monroe's like, oh, great. And so they pull in their energy, and Monroe follows suit, and they wind up back near the earth, the near earth field. And Monroe says they zero in on this one sort of room in this place. And there's a desk, and there's a human behind there. And Rose, they arrive, and Rose just feeling the energy, and he says, it's just this perfect oscillation between feminine and masculine. It's perfect. Yin and yang. Back and forth. And he's like, I've never come across an energy like this. What do I call this human? A he-she. I'll call it a he-she. And this being's like, a he-she? I've never been called that before. And I was like, oh, hello. But of course, I'm here. and this dialogue started between the two, and this human, said, yes, go ahead, read me, read into my energy. I'm open, you can read me. And Monroe's like, I'm getting a concept here, but I don't know if I can quite get my head around it. I'm getting that you've lived one consecutive human lifetime of about 1,800 years. It's like, this is correct. And you don't, he's going on about, eating and sleeping, and it's like, I don't eat and sleep in a way that you've become accustomed, that you now know of. And Monroe's like, I'm digging a bit more. You're a bartender. You're an ambulance driver and a university lecturer. All these roles. And he's trying to help Monroe understand that, he's expressing his human consciousness in such a different way. It's not, too far off where we're at. That part of us is there. Jürgen, said in a talk I attended once, and he said, a part of us is always enlightened. And so Monroe sort of finishes off this experience asking this individual if he can come to the Monroe Institute and sort of work on some of the energy, and promised to do so. And later in Monroe's book, he has this sort of writes-up at the end of one of the chapters where he's like done some research, I guess, while out of body, and put some figures together. And he says, I kind of reckon there's probably about 4,000 individuals on this planet at that moment in time, of high quality, and there's probably whittled that down to about 400 of such exceptional human ability you wouldn't even recognize them as being human. Probably the old lady sitting on the park bench, you just sort of fob off as just being, she's just going to tell me old stories. And Monroe sort of got real comfort, I think, from the idea that, there was balance in this world. There were individuals here of epic evolution holding this space. No matter how painful it seems, how much imbalance there is with, corporate media and, sort of all the interests of corporations controlling governments. And it seems this like 1% is controlling this world, and it's about money when it's not about money, when it's really about power and maybe really about something else. But Monroe's shown us that, there is balance. And with that experience I had, I really felt deeply inspired that the universe knows what it's doing. Even, that part that's just maybe unexpected, that part that, it will be surprised by, it trusts. It trusts that whatever experiments come from that unknown, it trusts that it'll be okay. I'd like to leave you with, once again, sort of putting this back to you. This is your journey. How far are you willing to sort of trust and have that courage? I can't do it for you. Just like others couldn't have done it for me, but others held the space for me. Even when I didn't see the space being held, the space was being held. And sometimes that space was being held by a future version of me, standing on a far-flung world, trusting that there was something more, and healing a deep hurt, a deep wound inside me, because I trusted. We're going to leave it right there for the night. Yeah? Thank you. Okay. So it's just gone 10. So we've got another 4 o'clock rise. So once again, if any of you